Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Well, Matt, here we are, Thrive Deeper, and actually our last episode of Thrive Deeper on the Book of Proverbs. And we did take a somewhat different approach to this particular edition of Thrive, where we've kind of worked on topics rather than actually going through chapter by chapter or verse by verse. And been interesting. There's so much more in Proverbs than we've been able to cover, obviously. But the last one we're going to cover today is Proverbs on anger.
Yeah, which, as I've said each episode, it's interesting to note what are the main themes in the Book of Proverbs. And what we've tried to do is look at those main themes. Obviously, there's a lot of topics, a lot of themes that get covered in the Book of Proverbs. But yes, one of the most common themes is the theme of anger. And, this is an interesting one because there's nothing like anger that can destroy a life, other people's lives and your own lives. And the Book of Proverbs is very much about flourishing. It's pointing us towards the way of flourishing. It's the tree planted by the streams of water. It's grounded in the fear of the Lord. And so this is, wisdom for life to enable us to do well, basically. Yeah. And one of the things that the Proverbs consistently point out that will shipwreck your life is anger. Yeah. In different ways. I may say in different ways. And there's different kinds of anger that, get addressed. One of the most common forms is the kind of quick to anger, the hot-tempered thing. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But there's also the sort of harboring anger, the sort of bitterness of soul,
I think we do tend to be more aware, perhaps, of the anger that kind of spills out and hurts other people, but less aware of how much internalizing that anger, and as you say, that bitterness actually does impact and can have the potential to shipwreck our lives.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, dealing with anger well is one of the most important aspects of biblical spirituality, which is why I think it features so prominently in the Psalms.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, great segue for me, Matt, because one of the things I did want to mention, listeners, is that Matt has written a book called Deeper Places, which is a reflection on the spirituality of the Psalms. And there is a chapter in that book called Anger Management. And it's a really powerful approach to how we should deal with our anger, and that anger isn't only a negative thing. Anger can be a positive thing, but it's what we do with that anger. So one of the things we're going to do at the end of this podcast is you'll find a link wherever you access your podcast, and we're going to make that chapter of Matt's book, Deeper Places, available for you to download and have a read. And I think you might find that really helpful. But as you say, Matt, we do see a lot of that.
That's right.
In the Psalms.
It boils pretty hot at times, anger in the Psalms. And things happen in life and we get angry. That's just, it is the way it is. And as you say, the most important thing is what we do with the anger, really. And we can tend to think as Christians that we need to sort of repress that and kind of return, be all sort of nice and charming, but which of course we do need to be nice to people. But repressing anger is surely going to make things worse for you. And so what we see in the Psalms is people actually taking their anger to God and laying it out before God. And there's something remarkable about that process, because one of the problems, of course, and so just putting aside the hot temper thing, we'll talk about that in a moment. But anger as an issue, as a life issue, we've all been wronged in many ways. And when you are wronged or if you take offense at something and you hold on to that, it's a kind of poison for the soul. And so what you see on the contrary in the Psalms is the psalmist taking that to God, because one of the issues with anger is that there's nothing like anger to tempt us into the position of judge. In fact, often anger gets compounded because maybe we validly got angry, but the great temptation in our anger is for us to take the position of judge and play judge over the other person. And then you've locked yourself in a position from which it's very difficult. That's when, in a sense, you get sort of locked in a position of anger, right? Because there's a sort of a hatred or a malice or even just a bitterness towards a person, which to sustain that you have to have taken some position of judge, over that person. Essentially, what you see in the Psalms. Of course, people suffering terrible, terrible things, right? I often say the Psalms come to us from the coalface of the human predicament, really. Yeah. There are things that the psalmists are suffering that are unimaginable to us, like injustices and cruelty and so forth. So what they're doing is, in the Psalms, the angry Psalms, and anyone who's had a cursory read of the Psalms will know that there are many angry Psalms. They're essentially taking that anger to God, who is the judge, right? Yeah. I mean, Paul says in Romans, chapter 12, do not repay evil with evil, right? Why? Because vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And he quotes from Deuteronomy. Yeah. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So essentially what the angry Psalms are doing is taking that to God and say, okay, this is yours. This is your prerogative, is to do the judgment part.
Yes.
Right? I'm angry, but it's your prerogative to do the judgment part. And they're taking that to God. And, and often it's expressed in all of its, and because that's what it's about. The Psalms express a relationship, and in a relationship you say how you feel. And so there's plenty of that in the Psalms. And where, and this is important too, because where anger is unjustified, it's also just as important to take it to God, because you take your anger to God, maybe there might be some correctives there.
I was just
maybe you're looking at that the wrong way.
Yeah, totally. For myself, there are times where I've got angry. I tend to internalize my anger a lot more, probably. That's just my personality type. But you can get so wound up in that anger that you actually can't be objective in reflection on your behavior in the situation, because your anger just completely eradicates that objectiveness.
That's right. Yeah.
And even later, when you come to a point of recognizing perhaps you had something wrong, it's still hard to accept that because of the amount of anger that you allowed to stay in your heart.
Yeah, that's right. Because it locks us into a certain perspective, and it's naturally self-justifying.
Yes.
So when we're angry at a person, we get into this cycle of self-justification, which makes us more angry. And part of our self-justification is going and talking to other people. And this links back to our episode on speech. So we're a nice little link back to the first episode where we talked about gossip. Often gossip can be a form of anger expression.
Or justifying our
anger. I'm saying something about a person because I've suffered from that person. Yes. I'm just subtly undermining their reputation, because one of the things that anger wants to do is spread. When it becomes bitterness, it becomes almost like a disease, and that you want to sort of almost like sneeze it onto other people so that they get angry with you. And it's like everyone should be angry with me. And so we've just got to really watch that, because it can spread like wildfire. And essentially there we are playing judge. But of course, the big thing is that anger is poison for the soul, because of all of these things, because it makes us vulnerable. We lose all perspective. We take the position of the judge rather than one of the other people who are in the dock, so to speak. Often, we take the judges. It's like the wrong position in life. And so it can be quite soul destroying. So, as Psalm 4 says, be angry, but do not sin, right? That's the important thing is. So I think, the Psalms provide a model for us of, people taking their anger to God rather than suppressing it, and working through that with God, and just giving all prerogative for judgment over to God. But it says in Proverbs 29:22, an angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins. We'll get to the hot-tempered thing in a moment. But just that relationship between anger and conflict, angry people will almost invariably escalate conflict always, So if we're angry about something, we'll more likely be angry about most things, Now, it's interesting, Stu. I feel like in our culture, this wildfire of anger gets spread around through social media. It's like we're looking for things to get angry at.
Yeah.
And
then to have our say.
Because
now we can.
Yeah. It's the classic cancel culture. Like, can you believe what that person said? And so, we're a culture of outrage, and
I think more to
it's
that,
very unhealthy.
And you've talked about the quick anger thing. More to that is that we can respond instantly without actually having to take some time. In the olden days where you might have to write a letter to the editor or something, you had plenty of time to reflect.
Yeah.
Now we can just be very impulsive. Within a few seconds, we can have something up there.
That's right.
And it's so dangerous, totally.
And it can be things that have no relationship with us. Like,
exactly.
It can be about some view that I have about, political situation in America, let's say, right? This is not really going to affect my life. And yet I can seethe with anger about that other people don't share my view, or that that people don't see it the way that I do, or that, why? Yeah. Why not rather take and this is where I think one of the important alternatives to anger is humility. Of course, part of humility is I'm not the judge, right? I'm just as broken, probably just as annoying, probably just as hurtful as anyone, okay? Yep. But it's also the humility to say, what do I know really? Yep. Do I really know so much that I can afford to have this level of frustration at everyone else that doesn't see my point of view? Or, who am I to respond with outrage to this circumstance? Yeah. And why? What's the point of that?
And slightly off topic, but I think we always feel like we have to have an opinion.
Yeah.
Which is slightly off topic, but instead of just going, well, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
No, we have to take a side. It's like the world today seems like you have to take a side.
It's interesting because just the other day, actually, it seems to be whenever political things flare up, you know what I mean? I found myself getting a bit sort of hot under the collar about something in opposition to another person's view, you know what I mean? And I could feel it happening. I just said to myself, look, maybe they're at least partially right. Maybe I'm largely wrong, And the more I reflected on that, the more my anger just calmed down. Yeah. This wonderful calming effect. And and it brought me back to a place of peace again, because I thought, really, what do I know?
Yes.
What, do I really know what's best in such a complex, area? The more I took that humble position, the more, the more anger dissipated. This is, I think, the theme of Psalm 131. My heart is not proud, my eyes not haughty. I do not concern my things with too wonderful for me, but I've stilled my soul like a well-fed child. This sense of, I'm going to feed myself in the truth of God. I'm not going to take the proud position of judgment or the position of the all-knowing one that adjudicates all of the issues of the day. If you taking the position of judge, taking the position of universal political adjudicator or issues adjudicator, you will live in anger. Honestly, and it's not worth it, and it's not good for you. It's not even physically healthy.
And I think we need to remind ourselves that it's okay to say, look, I don't know enough about that to actually have an opinion.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It seems in this world that's not okay, but it is
if I'm angry at a person, maybe there's a whole lot of things that I don't know about that person.
Right. I think that's a really good point, because one of the things I think I've had to learn over life's journey is you let a little bit of a seed of anger come up, and then you start to paint this whole picture around whatever it was that person you think did or said or whatever it might be. And then you judge everything else they do or say in the context of that anger that you're harboring in your heart. And of course, as this proverb says, that just stirs up conflict. It just creates more.
That's right, compounds more.
And so getting in early and saying, hey, Matt, well, this is what you said. That's how it made me feel. Was that what you meant? Yeah. You can shut that down really quickly. And we're sort of back to the words one again here. But I think, again, that's a really important lesson, is to, if you harbor anger, it's only going to actually make it worse for you and the relationship that you're particularly
That's right. There was a story, Stu, and this is probably a bit of a link to the other podcast that we do, Thrive Perspectives, which we've just recorded one the other day on near-death experiences. One of the features of near-death experiences, a very common feature of near-death experiences, is this life review. Often they're very vivid. They go back to very vivid moments in their lives. There's one story, because I've read so much about this in the research for that Thrive Perspectives podcast. There was one story of a young man who, very sort of angry young man. And anyway, he had an accident or something, and he had this life review thing where he's, went back to a particular circumstance where someone with road rage, just kind of, was going at him, and then that stirred up the conflict, like this says, and then it aroused his anger, and he actually really beat this guy, this older guy, got out and pulled him out and just sort of beat him up in the middle of the road and people were watching. And anyway, in his life review, he actually experienced that not only from his perspective, but also from the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
And very vividly, like he actually felt the blows, but more importantly, he actually felt the humiliation of that person in that moment, and even felt the issues, the reason why that guy was like, there was a lot going on in that guy's life that caused him
to react,
to react and be angry in that way, and then just the humility of, compounded that, and again just this remorse at that, at that circumstance. And for me, I found that a really powerful story because it reminded me that anger is a very selfish thing. It's always about what I'm feeling right now, and I'm feeling this right now, and you just kind of letting off steam at and inevitably someone else bears the brunt, cops that, and someone else gets punished because of that. And in situations of conflict, that like being mindful and having the perspective, assuming a perspective, there's another perspective there. If someone's angry at you, before you bite back, try to assume their perspective, and so
and believe the best in them.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we should always believe the best in a person until we know otherwise.
Yeah, that's right. So I found that a really powerful kind of reminder, actually, of the selfishness of anger, which leads on to this impulsive form of anger, Stu, which is, I don't know if you noticed, but this is probably the biggest theme in the Proverbs, is the impulsive anger and how that can destroy situations and relationships, because the Proverbs are a lot about the practical situations and sort of how to do well in life. And one of the consistent things is if you're hot-tempered, you will destroy relationships, destroy situations. You'll make all the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
So Proverbs 12 verse 16, fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult.
Yeah.
And that's that relational one. If someone offends you, just pause,
take a breath,
be prepared to overlook it.
Yeah.
Remember Jesus, he absorbed your offenses, right, and didn't return anger. So just remember, taking offense is a choice as well. I always think,
he made me angry.
Yeah, that's right. Or the phrase, I have a right to be offended, is very telling, I think. Because do we really? I believe in the light of the cross, the fact that God paid for our offenses, that he had the ultimate right to be offended. He was the offended party, and yet he chose not to pay that back to us. In the light of the cross, we no longer have a right to be offended.
Yeah, that's great.
You no longer have that right to be offended. And so that is a choice. Being offended is a decision that we make, and you can make the opposite decision. And so
Proverbs 14:17 says, a quick-tempered person does foolish things, and the one who devises evil schemes is hated.
Yeah. Whoever is patient, on the contrary, has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. In a tantrum, you are never, ever going to act rationally or wisely. That's right. For sure.
Never going to make good decisions when you're angry.
That's right. So if you're angry, make as few decisions as you possibly can.
Right.
Like go lie on your bed with your face down, your head under your pillow, right? And then come out and make decisions, whatever,
Yeah.
So
it's funny, isn't it? We're for those of us who are parents, we can all remember raising our kids and going, just count to 10 before you lash out.
Yeah.
Yet when as adults, we probably seldom do that, and we should.
And I think, referencing our last episode where we talked about relationships, and one of the big themes there, is discipline, particularly in terms of children. One of the points that we made there is that the worst way to discipline your children is in anger. Don't discipline them in the moment, like in a rage. That's that's always going to be problematic. You've always got to allow that to, as I said, in the moment of anger, you're least likely to make a good decision, like least likely. Almost, I would say, Stu, of any emotions, really, anger is the one where you're more likely to make a destructive decision.
1919 is an interesting one. A hot-tempered person must pay the penalty. Rescue them, and you'll have to do it again. And I'm thinking about experiences that I've had where there's an element of perhaps fear, but reluctance to kind of address when someone has gone off the handle and they need to be addressed about it.
Yeah.
And you kind of just, oh no, I'm just going to,
I'm just going to leave it. That's
just
the way that they are.
Or even like, oh no, I don't want to go there. But in reality, you need to, because otherwise it's going to happen again.
Yeah, that's right. And, again, one of the keys in relationships, well, probably the key is communication.
Yeah.
So communicating back, actually, this is the wound from a friend. If you are the right person in the right time in the right place, it's that moment to say, listen, that's not okay, because if we just let it go and go and go, it's not doing them any service. It's interesting, Proverbs 22, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Remember, these aren't laws. Again, we've said this in every episode. These are not laws. These are sort of, this is advice, kind of general advice, not saying you must cut, if, a hot-tempered person, you've got to cut them off. It's an interesting caution, though, isn't it, Stu? Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person and do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared.
Yeah.
The context there, I think, is important, because what it's picturing there is being friends with someone that's always getting angry about the latest this or the latest that or the latest issue or the latest thing that comes out, and they will want to pull you in. That's the issue there.
And it's difficult not to be.
Yeah, that's right. An angry person will want to make you as angry, and they will even get frustrated if you're not angry as them at that issue. So that's the issue there. You may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared because of the way that angry people want to make other people angry as well.
Earlier, Matt, you mentioned the danger of harbouring anger, of keeping anger in our hearts. And Proverbs 14:10, each heart knows its own bitterness and no one else can share its joy.
Yeah.
So that's, I think you said before, people who are angry about one thing tend to become angry about many things.
Yeah.
In fact, about life in general. Yeah. And it's difficult then to share any joy with them because they just always seem to be angry people.
Yeah, that's right. There's also warning here against a lot of warnings against arousing anger as well. I think often in anger we also, we've said this, haven't we? In anger we often also want to arouse anger.
Yes.
It's kind of a way of sort of punishing. It's an interesting, slightly veiled way of punishing another person because I'm really angry. And anger, it's a sort of soul torture. It's a terrible poison of the soul, which is why we need to deal with it well. But in a sense, what we do in anger is like we spit the poison in a sense, and we want to infect them with the same anger. And so this is where often conflict just compounds and becomes a perfect storm because I'm angry, so I make you angry.
Yeah. Like
I will say something deliberately to make you angry, and then you get angry at me, and that almost justifies my anger at you and just goes ping pong, back and forward. This can be one of the things that destroys, I think, the closest relationships, particularly marriages, when it's just like back and forth. And the cruelest things can. We always say the cruelest things when we're angry.
But even subtle, more subtle kind of thing in terms of our closest relationships, it's like there are things I know I do that, maybe anger is a strong word, but my wife gets frustrated with. And they're just little things that I could do different. I don't see the problem with it, but they're little things I could do differently, but I just can't be bothered changing my ways. Right. And so I'm just really stirring up her anger, and that's where we need to be willing to kind of reflect on ourselves and go, well, what does it matter for me to do it the way that she'd prefer it to have to be done? Because then that's going to eliminate that anger.
And actually, that's a lot of the Proverbs are talking about that sort of thing.
Yes.
Don't unnecessarily arouse anger. Like, do what you can to actually, keep the situation peaceful. A lot of them, interestingly, refer to the king, not arousing the king to anger, which in this context is probably a good idea.
Yep.
A king delights in a wise servant, but a shameful servant arouses his fury. A king's wrath is a messenger of death, but the wise will appease it.
Yeah.
A king's rage is like the roar of a lion, but his favor is like the dew of a grass. A king's wrath strikes terror like the roar of a lion. This is Proverbs 20. To those who anger him forfeit their lives.
Feels like a king wrote this.
It does, doesn't it? Well, I think it probably is.
Yeah.
But let's take this away from kingship and the ancient world and actually put it in maybe in the workplace.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Be a blessing to your employers.
Yeah.
And don't arouse their anger by, negligence or
ignoring instructions.
Your attitude or ignoring
totally.
instructions, or like strive to be a blessing and create a peaceful workplace. Strive to actually preempt what they're after, and what that's where I think these apply, is actually being considerate in situations like that. But it's not only, of course, in those situations, about, as you mentioned, being considerate of other people, not mucking them up.
Yeah.
I even know, as someone in a senior leadership position, how easy it is actually to do things that really mess things up for other people and make them angry, because now I have to redo that whole thing because I just made this last minute decision, or I just forgot something that I'd agreed to, and then, said, oh, but let's do it this way, and they'd already arranged, whatever, you know what I mean? It can be easy to do that as an employer, or as a boss, and to sort of really muck up those who are accountable to us. And one of the things in situations like that is that they may not feel that they can communicate that back, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's like they actually probably do have a right, they do have a right to be angry because I've done the wrong thing. But, am I aware of that? Am I stirring up anger in them unnecessarily just through not being considerate and so forth?
And in that situation too, just acknowledging the fact that, hey, look, I realize this is a late change and you would have done a lot of work or whatever it might be around. I think that helps to lower the threshold for when people will get angry, because they recognize that you recognize that they've already put a lot of effort in. There's a great proverb there we kind of moved over that I think gets quoted a lot, and I think it's an important one. Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And I think when someone's angry at us and expresses that anger, how we respond has a huge impact on where it goes from there.
Massive impact. And that actually then opens the way for a more habitual, peaceful resolution of conflict in ongoing relationships. Because if someone communicates to me that what I did is either offended them, or which again is fine to do. Like, again, at no point are we here. So if you feel hurt by what someone has said, or if they've really mucked you around and just repressing that and being a walkover isn't the answer. Communicate. Remember, this is all in the context of relationships, right? And the most important thing is we build healthy relationships, and just repressing anger is not the way to build a healthy relationship. I mean, again, be careful that you're not playing judge. If it's some big thing, remember you got to take that and pray about that, take that to God like the Psalms do. But actually communication with the person who hurt you is really important. You really actually hurt me, or that really made me feel disrespected, or that really mucks me around. Like you had said that you would do this and that. And the thing is, if someone says that to you, the temptation there is to be, and this is in our pride, is to get angry at the person that expresses that. Yeah. And that's where I think that gentle answer is really, really important, because if we want communication to be the name of the game in our relationships, for the sake of good relationships, then we need to make sure when someone expresses how they feel to us, even if it is actually dysfunctionally expressed, right? Even if they're raging and obviously they're hurt. Okay, so rather than think about just what the effect of this happening on me, okay, how are they feeling? Right? What is the reason for that? The gentle answer that turns away wrath can actually open the way for more productive communication in the future, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, so I can actually communicate with this person, And I think that's really important, particularly in leadership positions. If you muck people around, or if you do the wrong thing, if you want to create a situation where people can come to you and express that, if you just strike back, or self-justify or get angry when they express that to you, just shut down a communication loop, a really healthy communication loop.
And just extending that slightly more, that quiet answer actually provides a platform for the person who is angry to self-reflect. Because if you just strike back, then it becomes, as you say, strike for strike. A quiet answer allows that person to just stop, maybe I need to rethink that. Maybe I didn't express that well or whatever it may be. So.
And notice it's a gentle answer. It's
Yes.
the gentle answer turns away wrath.
Yeah. It's not answering at all.
That's right. It's not answering at all. And because one of the things that also can stir up conflict, if there's attack which is met by defense, that compounds conflict.
Yes.
Right? If you attack me and then I defend myself, I'm just compounding the conflict. But if I give a gentle answer back and I say, Stu, you might or just
help me understand that.
Just help you, or whatever. Just try to hear what you're saying. Whatever that looks like, then that gentle answer is just going to gradually dissipate, help to dissipate the anger in this situation and open the way for productive communication. Because we also, in anger, we rarely communicate well. And so let's just be realistic about that, actually. If someone is angry at you, rather than give the harsh answer back, just recognize, look, when a person is angry, they're very unlikely to communicate well. So just try and hear what they mean and not what they say.
Yes.
And that will, that can be part of the gentle answer, is actually trying a bit of empathy in there.
Yeah.
So,
that's good.
And so obviously a big part of this then is patience and forbearance. And that's a big theme in these Proverbs. Of course, we read the proverb, fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. Proverbs 16:32 says, better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control and one who takes a city.
Yeah.
Patience is a great, great virtue, as opposed to just striking back or being self-defensive, or that moment to just wait and be forbearing with the other person, to maybe absorb some of the, whatever's coming at you, to absorb some of the heat, to patiently endure that. Okay. If something's come at you that's been hurtful, just patiently let it, don't get into the attack and don't enter the fray. Right. Yeah. The patience in a sense, draws the bitterness out of it. It allows time for the bitterness to dissipate. So, I mean, I love that. Better a patient person than a warrior, right? Because, we think of
just going into battle.
Yeah, going into battle, right? I mean, if you want to win a battle, patience is the way to go. It's a great one. Whoever is patient has great understanding. Proverbs 14:29. Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly.
1911's a good one too. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offence.
Yeah.
And so again, those things where, pick your battles, I guess would be a statement that's used a bit by people, but there are things that we just need to let it go. It doesn't matter. There are other things that we do need to address, and I think we've covered that fairly well. There's a really interesting one here, Matt, under appeasing anger. A gift given in secret soothes anger, and a bribe concealed in the cloak pacifies great wrath. Okay, help me out with that one. As I pull out a $50 note.
This is a classic, this is a classic sort of Proverbs thing. Proverbs are often not saying about, they're not talking about
what's right or wrong.
What's right or wrong. They're just saying how things often are, right?
That's right.
And, a gift given in secret soothes anger, and a bribe concealed in a cloak pacifies great wrath. I noted that one, and I thought this is one of those proverbs that's just about the way that things are.
Yeah.
I think in a way, it's difficult to know what sort of situation that's talking about, but I think there is something legitimate, like as long as it's, it's not, obviously when we think of bribes, I mean, a bribe is, by its very nature has a sense of injustice to it. But the gift given in secret here is to gain favor, in a sense.
Right. Okay.
Is the idea there. It's the idea of gaining favor. And you can do that with a gift, particularly with someone that's angry at you. You know what I mean? I'm going to work at attaining their favor with some kind of gift. That's as close as I can get to finding something.
Yeah. Well, for me, I thought like, again, and the in secret's an important thing. I thought for me in reflecting on this is if someone has got, angry at us for something and we do want to find a path back, then maybe just writing a card or something but not making a big hullabaloo about it. Just between
Yeah.
you and them and saying, hey, look, I'm really sorry I made you feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it sometime. You know,
Yeah.
that can, again, just out of the heat of the moment, can actually allow people, you know, I remember doing that once and the person rang me up straight away and go, oh, I'm so glad. I just couldn't find a way back to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
You know, and it just opened the door
exactly.
for that to happen.
Exactly.
So,
Proverbs 29:8 is a good one and brings up, I think, an important topic, Stu. Mockers stir up a city, but the wise turn away anger. You know, mockery. We haven't really talked about that, but there is a bit about this in the Proverbs and often in the Psalms. Often evildoers are characterized as mockers. They're people that mock other people constantly. And I think we just got to watch out for that because one common way of expressing anger is mockery.
Yes.
We mock the other person, and it's interesting because it's sort of almost in the guise of humor,
jest,
right? I'm going to mock them, and that's a sort of a way of. It's an interesting way, isn't it, of punishing a person?
Yeah. But it also stirring up other people around you because they go, oh, he's like that, or she's like that, or whatever it might be. And you're building this, you're stirring this kind of group of people who, in a sense, are agreeing with you about why you're rightfully angry with this person, you know.
Essentially what mockery does is it's designed to humiliate the other person. Yeah. It's a form of anger that punishes the other person by humiliating them, by mocking them, right? This, of course, the most famous biblical example of mockery is the mocking of Christ, right? That he was, you know, when they put the crown of thorns and the cloak on them, and they mocked him, right? Because it was getting around that he had claimed to be king of the Jews.
Even the sign on the cross, you know.
That's right. Yeah. People mocked him when he was, you know, when he was on the cross. It was to shame him and to humiliate him. And of course, you know, crucifixion was designed to humiliate the victim, and the mockery went with that.
But not just him, it was also a message as to stirring up the city from the Romans to say, this is what happens to people who want to assert themselves as being some kind of leader here.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not just about him, you know, mockery is actually about getting a whole lot of other people agreeing with you about that as well.
That's right. And, you know, Psalm 1, you know, blessed is he who does not sit in the seat of mockers, right? Do not share with mockers. Don't be mocking people all the time. You know, and again, there's a lot of this going around. There's a lot of mockery I see on social media, and it's all ha, ha, ha. And even if it's mockery of people in power, it's not really healthy.
No.
You know, mockery, and again, the association, honestly, the association with the humiliation of Christ and the mockery that happened there, that should turn us forever away from any form of mockery. To ever mock another human being, I think is just a terrible way of disrespecting another human being. And respecting other people is such a big part of what it means to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love other human beings, to actually show respect. Every human being is absolutely sacred, and to, in anger, mock another person in order to humiliate them is a terrible, terrible punishment. And it's one that sets us up in a place that I think is a very soul-destroying place to be.
Yeah, which takes us nicely back to where we began with Proverbs. Wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
And remembering our position, as you said before, we're in the dock, we're not the judge. Remembering that we're as broken as everyone else, and to reflect on that before we respond in anger.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think to close, Stu, it's always important for us to remember that we have a decision. We always have a decision, right? In anger, there's still decisions being made, decisions that we cannot make. Often we can think, well, I was just angry, right? Well, no, but you still made a decision. And I would encourage us to think beforehand. This is the thing. We've got to resolve beforehand in these situations so that next time I get angry, this is where it's, I think, useful thinking and reflecting on this sort of theme today, Stews, because as we reflect on this, we can become more conscious so that next time I feel anger, I can think, okay, this is one of these situations. Now, what decision am I going to make in that split second? Make the right decision. You might need to communicate. Just say, look, I just need a break. I just need to, It might be that you just need to pull away from it for a moment. You might just need to not say anything right there. At some point, you will need to communicate. But again, try to make a good decision. Try to see things from the other person's point of view. Try to find patience. Pray in the moment, Lord, give me patience. Pray now that God would give you patience with other people. Habitually think from other people's point of view. These are the sorts of things that are going to help us to alleviate anger in the moment. Because as I've said, anger will destroy you. It will destroy other people. It will destroy circumstances. So let's all pray for patience.
Listeners, thanks for joining us for this episode of Thrive Deeper, as we've looked at what the Bible says about anger in the Book of Proverbs. You will recall at the start of this episode, Matt offered to make the anger management chapter of his book, Deeper Places, available to our listeners to download for free. So here's where you can do that. On the notes with this podcast, depending on your podcast app, you will find a link to the download. Alternatively, if you can't locate that, visit the homepage of our website, thrivetoday.tv. And at the top of the homepage, you'll see an orange button that says Anger Management Excerpt. Click on that to open the PDF and then save it on your device. You'll also find more information about Matt's book, Deeper Places, within that document. We hope you enjoy it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper and thrive.